Hey everyone, it's Hannah Saver from HR Images, and today it's going to be like a review on the 50-150 f2 lens, which I've got here, one of Sony's latest lenses that have been released. And in this, I want to show you just a side-by-side comparison with the 85GM, 50-1.2GM, as well as the 135GM, just to show you in terms of the comparison between this and Prime, whether or not you are going to wanting to get this lens and replace all primes. So stay tuned. So here we've got the 50-150 f2. So the good thing about this lens, it is a constant aperture of f2. So you got the 35-150, which was a great lens. I did enjoy that lens, loved it. Only thing is that it was only f2 at 35. So whenever you are zooming out, then it goes to 2.2 and then 2.8. Where this one is giving the consistent aperture of f2. Now, Sony has released it as a 50-150, not a 35-150, but in saying that if they did a 35-150, it'll be a lot larger than what it is now. So, like other G Master lenses, you've got the G Master logo, you got the aperture ring, you got the iris lock to lock the aperture ring, as well as the D-click on and off. You've got the autofocus and manual focus here, as well if you want full-time DMF on or off. If you're doing a side-by-side comparison against the GM 7200 f2.8 GM Mark II, they're both very similar in size. Now, the 5150, it looks large, but when I first picked it up, I was actually very impressed with the weight. Now, it does weigh 1,340 grams, whereas the 7200 weighs 1,045 grams. So it is a bit heavier. I was actually very, very impressed in terms of the weight with this lens. When I started, like, oh wow, this is going to be a heavy lens because the size, the f2 aperture. But I was actually very, very impressed with how well balanced it is, especially when you have it mounted on the camera. The only thing is, a lot of the G Master lenses, they are 77mm filter thread or 82. This one's a 95mm filter thread. You do have some filters. I can't remember the brand, but I do know there is a filter brand that does the 95mm thread, so it is there. And unlike the 35-150, it is a constant aperture of f2 lens. So it is actually, I've used it, so I'm just going to talk to you about this in a real world scenario. As you know, if you followed me, all my reviews are more based on real world scenarios. I don't like to just do what's on paper or things like that. I'll do a bit of mix of that, but it's how well does it perform. So will I replace the 7200 GM with the 5150? It's hard to say. It is a great lens. I've used it. So I paired this up with a corporate event, and as I'm talking, I'll post images of this lens, results from this lens from this corporate event. And I actually paired it with the 2870. That's 2870 f2 and the 50-150 f2. That worked well side by side because it's a constant f2 aperture right through 24 to 150. So the quality and the consistency is there. Whereas you do, which is why I don't tend to use the 2470 f2.8. And yes, I will be getting the 2870 f2 if some people are wondering. Now, the question was whether or not you're going to miss that 200mm. Now, there were times where I needed that extra reach, but I did switch the camera into crop mode. So I was shooting with the A1, and I did switch it into crop mode to get that extra reach. Whereas if you had the 7200, if you switch into crop mode, you'll get further than the 200mm. But I'm very rarely needing to do that there. It is, if you're not too fussed with the 200mm range, and you can sacrifice a bit of in the pixel size and go crop mode to get that extra reach, combined with the 2870 for corporate events, for everyday use, it's actually really good. I did shoot weddings with the 7200, and I'm like, there's times where I need the 200mm because when you're at a church or at an event, so like some of these images I was showing you with the keynote speakers, I can't go beyond the audience. You don't want to distract them, especially when they're talking or there's a little workshop happening. I'm always having to sit behind them and using the extra reach to get the image. So this 200mm would have been perfect at it, but then doing crop mode, having the f2 aperture, letting in that little extra light, so you're reducing the ISO, was actually a great thing that I had. And then just doing crop mode, you get that 200mm reach. Now, the 28-70, I tend to use that more on the wider side. So when I'm between the 28 to 50 mark, I'll tend to go for that, for like the group shots. But generally for like the candid shots, the networking shots, the 50-150 was the one that's always been at use. It is, yes, the price point is around the 6,800 Australian dollars. I know some places have it on sale at around 5,008. So it is a bit more in a heftier price tag, but you're basically getting multiple lenses in one at the wide aperture at f2. So it's just whether or not you want to sacrifice the primes and get this, or if you're still a prime lover. What I'll do now, it's just to get more into it, we're going to be talking to you about the background blur between the 50-150 and prime lenses at the widest aperture as well as f2, making it match each other. So I'll show you that on the screen, and then we'll talk about the bokeh as well as video focusing, and we will talk about sharpness as well. So let's start off with the background blur. So now looking at the images side by side, this image here is the first image is the 50-150 f2 wide open. This is at 135mm. Now the second image is at the 1.8 aperture at 135 GM. So now if you're looking at them side by side, they look very close in terms of it, in terms of the bokeh, the background blur. If we zoom in, sharpness, they both look very sharp, and you can see from the background how there isn't, you get a little bit more tad blurrer on the 135, which is the second image, and the first image is not as blurry, but like it is still blurry, but like if you compare it to the 1.8, you see the difference. Now, if we then go in and pick this is at f2, again, both sharp lenses, you cannot tell the difference. I can't tell the difference. If somebody can tell the difference, please do leave a comment. But if you're looking at it side by side, there isn't much difference in terms of the background blur. 85, so this is the 85mm. So this is the first image, 50-150 at 85 at f2, and the second image is at 85 GM Mark II at f1.4. You can sort of see, is there much difference? Look, it's probably a slight blur there on the 1.4, but it's not like a major difference. But there is a slight difference. You can sort of kind of tell, whereas the pole here looks a bit sharper, where this one's a bit more blurred out. Both sharp in on the eyes with eye autofocus. If you go to f2, comparing both at f2, same thing. The background blur is very identical to each other. There's at 85 on the 50-150 first image, and 85 GM Mark II second image. At f2, the background blur is very identical. So there's not much difference between them at f2 aperture. And if we go now to the 50-150 at 50mm, first image is at 50-150 at f2, second image is at f1.2 50 GM. If we zoom in, you have a bit more blur. Obviously in the 1.2, you can sort of see how it's a bit sort of more blurrier compared to the first image at f2. If we then go and compare both side by side f2, there's virtually no difference, to be honest, that I can tell. They're both sharp. Obviously this one, it focused on his hands because he's put his hands up in front, but it's still both sharp. You can see the detail on the bracelet at f2 at the 50mm. So now just showing you the side-by-side comparison between the focal length and the aperture. It's actually really hard to tell the difference when they're at all at f2. You see a slight difference when the prime lenses are at their widest aperture, but it just comes down to whether or not you want that wide aperture or you're happy with the 50-150 in terms of that consistent f2 with a range of focal length. So you're basically carrying one lens as opposed to three lenses, for example. We're going to go into this segment now here where I'm going to just wanted to show you guys the difference in terms of the focus. As he's running to me, I will be zooming out and capturing the image. I'm going to show you a side by side. All this was shot at the 50-150, wide open and zooming out. So you can see him running in, and you can see I'm zooming out, and as the closer he gets, I'll go wider and wider. So just gonna go in and just show you one by one scan through. I'm just gonna zoom in on his face. Just wanted to show you. So this is that burst mode. So if we're looking at him, they're all looking sharp. And as you can see, he's just running, and you can see from the background how I'm zooming out, going wider as he runs into me. It's held its focus, and it's captured every shot there is until he got really close where it passed its minimum focus distance. They're all actually pretty well shot and sharp. With a 35-150, if I had to do that when somebody's running at me, for example, there would be a lot of missed shots in there. So you get a good percentage of hit rates, but there is more of miss rates. Whereas the 50-150, you're getting close, basically the 100 all of the images. Now, if you're shooting a car or something very fast, that'll be a good test. But obviously, I've got nowhere to be able to access that, so I'm just doing it in more of a sports scenario where I'm having somebody running to me. So looking at this video now with the 50-150, as I'm zooming out, I've got it actually on focus tracking. So as I'm zooming out, how he's running to me in filming video, it's actually kept up with him, and it's like really tracked him well. Whereas like obviously going back to the 35-150, I would always have that hit zoom, so I got to retouch it to refocus quickly, so it's not too much of a difference. So, videographers for weddings, that sort of thing, this is actually really good in terms of that follow focus. So it actually holds its focus very, very well for video. All right, now we're going to talk about bokeh. If you're looking at bokeh, the 50-150, which is the first image, and then the second image is at 135. So this is both wide open. So the first image, 50-150 at f2, second image is 135 at f1.8. So you can see the 1.8, how the bokeh gets larger than the 50-150. So here is where you're going to be able to tell the difference more in terms of the bokeh. So the wider the aperture, the larger the bokeh balls. So the other thing I did notice is that the 135 gets in closer than the 50-150 at 135. So you do see that slight difference. Now, if we go to at f2, so the right image is at f2, the first image is at f2. So at f2, you're getting closer on the 135, so the bokeh balls looks larger. Whereas this is the maximum focus distance I can be able to go on both of them at 135. 85mm focal length, the first image at 50-150, and the second image 85-1.4 GM Mark II. So the right image is at 1.4, the first image is f2. The 50-150 at 85 actually getting closer than the 85 GM. So this is maximum. So you get closer in terms of the 50-150, f2. So being f2, you're getting a bit closer, the bokeh balls are larger, whereas the f1.4, you have more of a circular, but the bokeh balls aren't as large as the f2 because it's get closer. So now if we're going to look back at the f2 compared side by side, same thing. You get larger bokeh balls with the first image 50-150 at f2, 85mm focal length, opposed to the 85-1.4 GM Mark II at f2. Because the 85, I could not get closer than that. That's the closest I can get. Whereas the 50-150 at 85mm, I can get a lot closer. If you look at the 50mm focal length, the first image is 50-150 at f2, second image is 50mm 1.2 aperture. The bokeh balls in the f1.2 is slightly larger than the f2 on the first image. But the 50mm and the 50-150, it gets on the first image, it's gets in a bit closer than the second. If we compare it with the f2, again, closeness, the 50-150 gets closer, but now at f2 aperture, both of them, the bokeh balls, looks very identical, and the shape and the size is the same. So let's get into sharpness now. So if you're looking at the first image here, it's at the 50-150 at 135. Second image is the 135 GM, both at f2 aperture. If we go center sharpness on both, they look very identical. If we go corner to corner sharpness, I'd probably say the 135 is a tad sharper than the 50-150 at 135mm, but they're very, very close in the corner sharpness. But to be honest, realistically, clients aren't going to sit there and pixel peep. It's just photographers, we got a force of habit that we have to pixel peep. If we go to 85mm focal length, so first image is the 50-150 and second image is the 85 GM, both at f2. Center sharpness, very similar, very identical. Corner sharpness, again, they look very similar, very identical. I can't tell the difference at 85mm. If we now go to the last one at 50mm, first image 50-150 at 50mm f2. Second image is the 51-2 at f2. Center sharpness, they both look very identical again. Same thing, both center sharpness. Corner sharpness. The 50 GM 1.2 might have a slight edge in it, but there is very hard to tell. But they're very close in terms of the sharpness. So if you're looking at the focal length difference, they're both very similar in the sharpness. It just comes down whether you want a 50-150, a large range of focal length at a constant aperture of f2, or multiple primes. Now, if you do, yes, the 50-150 is a hefty price, but if you are going to buy multiple primes, they'll add up to the 50-150. So it just comes back to what you want to invest in. If you are like me, I love my primes. It'll be hard for me to get away with it, but I will consider the 50-150 for an everyday use, for travel, especially corporate events pairing with the 28-70. That will be a perfect match just to cover that whole range and not having to worry. Whereas christenings and weddings, I'll intend to use primes. Please leave a comment and let me know what you have chosen and why, or what you consider choosing. If you did enjoyed the video, please give it a like, share, and subscribe to this channel, and we'll catch you for future ones. See you guys.